got super comfortable because we're going to start with a game, or not a game, but we're going to start with an activity where you're going to be moving around the room a little bit. So I hope you're not super comfortable. We are in the second week of What I Really Want, a series on temptation. And do you know why we're spending so much time on temptation? It's like we don't really think about it very much, but we're spending so much time on it because it is a real thing that people deal with, and it does matter. And because sometimes we're afraid to talk about the tough stuff. So before we dive real deep on some of the tougher subjects, we just want to have a little bit of a icebreaker. So I'm going to show you guys some choices. And the first one, for example, the first one is candy bars versus cookies. I don't know if you guys can see my little things that are set up. I know if I turn them, you guys might not be able to see them. But basically, you have candy bars versus cookies. So which one, is more tempting? Like if there was a candy bar on one side of the room, say over there by those couches, and there was a set of cookies over on that side of the room, say on this table, which one would you want more? So go to the one that you would want more. Okay, it seems to be about an even split. Maybe the candy bar is a little bit more. I will say my favorite cookie is the M&M cookies, so I'd be kind of right there in the middle. But okay, so that's fun. Let's go to the next one. So same sides, but we have football versus basketball. And it can be watching basketball, it can be playing basketball, it can be fantasy basketball. I don't know if that's a thing. Is that a thing? I know there's fantasy football and I know there's fantasy baseball, but I've never heard of fantasy basketball. Okay. So basketball's definitely more, but I feel like there's probably more passion for football, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, our next choice. Sorry, my papers are being a little... All right, this one maybe you guys may not even care or know, but Mountain Dew versus Monster Energy. This is probably more for the leaders. That's probably good. It's probably good that there's probably not a lot of people who have had Monster on this age group. But, so yeah, Mountain Dew, I love Monster, but I shouldn't drink them. Mountain Dew has so many awesome flavors. Baja Blast is probably my favorite. All right, then we have Taco Bell, speaking of Baja Blast. Taco Bell versus McDonald's. I thought it would be cheating to put Chick-fil-A up here, so you can stay in the middle. So neither one is more tempting than the other. Okay, and then here's the last one for today. Disney Plus versus Netflix. That's after my own heart on that one. I like that. Netflix does indeed have anime. Okay. I didn't put Hulu or anything like that. Does anybody watch Hulu? What about the Amazon Prime? Okay. So there's a few there. All right, so that was fun. It was kind of get you moving. And the stuff we saw isn't really the kind of stuff we think of when we think of temptations, right? We're not oh man, I really shouldn't be watching Netflix, but it can be. I mean, Netflix can definitely be you you watch that instead of doing your homework or something. If we choose to give in to the temptation to eat a little candy or watch YouTube or Netflix or even buy a pair of sneakers, which Adidas wasn't up there. It was one of the suggestions, but it wasn't up there. Because I'm not a sneakerhead. Do we have any sneakerheads in here? Does anybody even know what that is? Okay. It's somebody who collects sneakers. I think it's a really interesting subculture. I'm not into it. It's very expensive to get into, but it's actually a lot of fun. I mean, I collect a lot of weird things. People collect a lot of weird things. Sneakers are not the weirdest thing I've ever seen collected. But not all temptation is the same, right? In the series, we've talked specifically about the temptation to do things that aren't good for us. And temptation means wanting to do something that may not be the best for us. So when we're tempted to do things like cheat on a test, or fight with our siblings, or lie to our best friends, we know we're dealing with big stuff that can have big consequences. And I don't know about you, but when that happens, I find myself wondering what it is that makes me want to do those things. Why am I tempted to do that stuff, especially knowing that there's going to be consequences to it? What makes me really, really want to do something that isn't good for me? I mean, usually we try to avoid the things. If we know something's not good for us, we try to avoid it, right? We go out of our way to be like, no, I'm not going to do that thing. Like, you don't jump out of a moving car because you know that's not a good thing to do. You know you will not come out of that in a good place, right? But we struggle with temptations all the time, even knowing that they're not good for us. I struggle with that. I know you guys struggle with it. When I find myself tempted to do something that I know isn't good for me, why? And maybe you felt the same way. Am I bad for wanting to do this? What if I'm already doing something that I know isn't good for me? Am I bad for thinking about it, even if I don't actually do it? See, one of our biggest struggles when it comes to temptation isn't whether or not we give in, and it's not always about the choices that we make or don't make. Sometimes the hardest thing about dealing with temptation is that how it makes us feel about ourselves. The guilt that we have can be almost worse than the knowing that it's just not good for us. Are we bad? Are we wrong? Are we the only ones that struggle with this? So the secret to this, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The secret to the struggle we face, we find it, the answer to this struggle is we can look at Jesus himself. Like, Jesus actually spoke on this, and he has some stuff to say about it. Because, I think people forget sometimes, right? Jesus isn't just the Son of God, which is, that's a lot. He is the Son of God. He is God made flesh. But he was also a human. He was a human being just like us. He came to earth, he walked among us, and he dealt with temptation. The one who came to die for our sins dealt with the same things that we deal with every day. Maybe he didn't have to worry about, oh man, do I have time to watch a little bit more Netflix before I do my homework, right? He didn't have to deal with that. But he still dealt with temptation. Before Jesus started traveling and teaching about God while he was here on earth, he went in the desert to pray, fast, and prepare for what was to come. And that might seem weird to you, but for Jesus, it was normal. He wanted to spend days he wanted to spend the time talking to his Father away from any of the distractions, including food. I used a word there, fast. And a lot of people may not know what fasting is. Fasting is literally you don't eat. And he did this for 40 days. He was out in the desert for 40 days. He prayed. He talked to God. And he was fasting for this whole time. And and day 40, he lasted 40 days. On day 40, he really started to feel that temptation. And you've probably kind of experienced this as well, right? You notice that temptation finds us in a similar way. It usually comes when we're not at our best, when we're already feeling down or we're already dealing with some stressful situations. that's when temptation can really feel the worst. That's what happened to Jesus. It's true that Jesus wasn't tempted to steal a cool pair of jeans or watch Netflix or anything like that, or to like, he wasn't tempted with like the sexual temptations that we may deal with. He wasn't dating or staying up late playing online games, but he was tempted over and over again. He was tired, he was lonely, he was hot, he was hungry, and he faced the temptation to give in to what was not his Father's will for him. And while we ultimately know he didn't give in to this temptation, we know he was tempted. And Jesus understands temptation. We see that what was written in the book of the Bible called Hebrews, and it's in the New Testament, it's part of the Bible that was written about Jesus and after Jesus' time here on earth, after he had died and been resurrected. And in the book of Hebrews, there's a verse, and it talks about his temptation. It says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." Let's break this down real quick. We use the phrase high priest, right? It's used to describe Jesus. The role of the high priest in Jewish culture was the liaison to God. He was the person that you would go to with all of the things you would dealt with, and they would go to God on your behalf. They were the only ones that were allowed into what's called the Holy of Holies. It was the holiest place within the temple. Like, a lot of these things don't exist anymore. But basically, you couldn't have a one-on-one conversation with God. You had to go through the high priest. And they're using that term for Jesus because he did that. He went before God and on our behalf. So he's the one that kind of opened that channel for us to have that conversation with God. Now we can have one-on-one conversations because of the things that Jesus did. So, and he dealt with these temptations, and that's what they talk about in the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews was actually a letter that was written to the Hebrews in the early church. And he's talking about Jesus here. So, does temptation mean that you're bad or wrong or not good enough? Well, no. We can see that everyone faces temptation, even Jesus. Your teachers, your siblings, your parents, your best friend, even Jesus, we've all dealt with temptation. So you're not alone. And because of that, we know that we're not failing or struggling or facing it alone when we have to deal with it. Jesus never made any mistakes. Jesus lived a sinless and blameless life. So if we see him dealing with temptations, we know that just having the temptations, just having those wondering about the things that we do every day, we know that we're not bad or wrong for facing temptation. Remember that everybody faces temptation, and because we know that's true, here are a few things that we can do the next time we feel ourselves struggling with temptation. Remember what is true about you. Bad choices don't make us bad people. One mistake doesn't mean that you're ultimately a bad person and you're irredeemable. The desire to do something we know we shouldn't doesn't make us anything other than human. So when you find ourselves facing temptation, remember that you are a child of God. You are God's good creation, and God has a plan for you. The things that we are tempted by don't change the things that God has said is true about us. And then next, invite Jesus into your temptation. Remember, Jesus understands what we're facing. He dealt with temptation. And because of that, he can help us stand firm when we're facing it. Ask for help, pray, and bring Jesus into your temptations. And then bring someone else in. Bring someone else into it. Since everybody faces temptation, that means your friends, your family, your parents, your siblings, your small group leaders, they all deal with temptations. So let somebody know the things you're struggling with so that they can share that burden with you, right? Tell a trusted friend or adult, like your small group leader, and invite them to encourage, support, and walk with you as you work to choose God's best in your life. And that's one of the main reasons that we love having small groups here, is for you to have a safe place to talk openly about the things that you go through every day, every week, every month. As you grow, we want to have a place and we want to have the people here that to support you and love you unconditionally as you go through these things. So just remember that everyone faces temptation, and there are people here for you when you are struggling with that kind of stuff. So as we head off into our small groups today, just think about who is that one person that I can talk to about temptation as I go through my week and as I go through my daily activities. I'm going to close with a word of prayer. We'll break off into our small groups, and we'll go from there.